The elevator doors were almost closed when she slipped her hand between them. I hadn't even noticed her walking up. I was too busy staring at my own reflection in the polished metal mascara slightly smudged under my left eye, hair still damp at the roots from the rain I'd walked through at lunch. It had been one of those Tuesdays that felt like it lasted 3 days. My feet hurt. My coffee had gone cold before I'd finished half of it. All I wanted was to get to my car and drive home in silence. She was from the marketing floor. We'd spoken maybe 4 times in 2 years. The kind of coworker you smile at in the break room but don't actually know. I remembered her name was Vanessa because she had it on a little enamel pin on her lanyard, one of those personalized ones people sell on Etsy. She stepped in, pressed L for lobby, and we both stood there the way you do in elevators, looking at nothing. "Long day," she said. "Every day lately," I said. She laughed a little. Then she looked at me sideways, the way people do when they want to say something but aren't sure if they should. I noticed it but didn't think anything of it. I was thinking about whether I had anything at home to make for dinner, or if I was going to end up in a Chick-fil-A drive-thru again. "Hey, random question," she said. "Is your husband's name Colin?" "Colin Marsh?" I turned to look at her. "Yes," I said. "Why?" The elevator was still moving. 3 floors. 2 floors. She pressed her lips together. "I thought so. I've seen his photos on your desk." She paused. "I think I've seen him before. At the Trader Joe's on Broadmoor. With a woman and a little girl." The doors opened. She walked out ahead of me, and I stood there for a second longer than I should have, one hand against the door frame, the lobby lights too bright and too loud all at once. "Maybe it was someone else," she said, already backing away. She looked like she regretted saying it. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I'm probably wrong." But she wasn't wrong. Some part of me already knew she wasn't wrong, the way you sometimes know things before you know them. Sitting low and quiet in your chest, like a stone you've been carrying so long you stop noticing the weight. My husband had been deployed to South Korea 18 months into our marriage. He was a civilian contractor for a defense logistics company. Not military. He was quick to correct people on that, but the work took him overseas for extended contracts. When we met, he just returned from a 14-month stint in Germany. He talked about it the way people talk about something they're proud of and a little tired of at the same time. The money was good, he said. Better than anything he'd find stateside with his experience level. And he traveled light, kept things simple. He was the kind of man who owned exactly one nice dress shirt and used it for everything from job interviews to weddings. We got married in September. By the following March, he was on a plane to Seoul. I was 28. We'd been together for 2 years before the wedding, and I thought I knew him completely. I thought the distance would be hard but manageable. I thought this was one chapter in a longer story, and eventually he'd come home for good and we'd buy a house somewhere with a real yard and maybe get a dog. We talked about all of it. He'd promised all of it. The contract was supposed to be 2 years. It turned into 4. The first extension, he called me crying. Told me the company needed him. Told me the money was too good to walk away from. Told me he'd make it up to me. I cried too. We spent 45 minutes on the phone at midnight his time. And by the end of it I'd said yes because I loved him and I believed him and I didn't know what else to say. The second extension he told me over text. Said his supervisor had asked and he'd already agreed before he could call me. Said he was sorry. Said it was 2 more years max, and then he was done. Finished. Coming home. I was 32 by then. I'd built a whole life around waiting. I worked. I kept our apartment, then moved to a smaller one when the lease ended and I couldn't justify the space alone. I made dinners for one and watched shows by myself and sent him photos of things I thought he'd find funny. A dog wearing a raincoat, a sign outside a diner that said "Open Tuesdays," "So met him," said Somit. He sent back voice memos. He said he missed me. He said he loved me. He said soon. I believed him every single time. After Vanessa said what she said in the elevator, I drove home and sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes without moving. Colin and I still talked regularly. Not every day, the time difference and his schedule made that hard, but several times a week. He told me just 10 days earlier that his current contract had 2 months left, that he was already looking at flights. that he wanted to take a week off somewhere warm, just the two of us, before dealing with the logistics of resettling back home. 2 months. He'd said 2 months. I thought about the woman Vanessa had seen. I thought about the little girl. I told myself there were 100 explanations. Maybe it was a colleague's family he was helping with something. Maybe Vanessa had seen someone who just looked like him. Maybe I was spiraling over nothing, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night I did something I'd never done before in our marriage. I went through his public social media. Not because I thought I'd find anything. Colin barely used it, maybe 3 posts a year, but because I needed to see something. Anything. Something that would either confirm what I was feeling or make me feel stupid for feeling it. His Facebook was mostly locked down, but his profile photo had changed sometime in the last several months. It was a picture of him at what looked like a backyard barbecue, holding a red cup, laughing at something off camera. Relaxed. Comfortable. At home. The barbecue didn't look like Korea. The trees in the background didn't look like Korea. The house didn't either. I zoomed in until the image blurred and my stomach dropped. On the edge of the frame, just barely visible, there was a child's hand on his arm. Small fingers. A purple painted thumbnail. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood there with my hands flat on the cold tile, breathing. I didn't say anything to him on our next call. I sat across from my laptop with my coffee and I smiled and I asked how the project was going and he told me, and I listened and I watched his face for something. A crack, a hesitation, anything, and there was nothing. He looked tired. He looked the same way he always looked. He said he loved me and I said it back. And after we hung up, I sat in the quiet and felt like I was dissolving from the inside out. I called my sister. She's the practical one. She doesn't spiral, she makes lists. Okay, she said when I gotten through it. Before we do anything else, we're going to find out if he's actually still in Seoul. She worked in HR at a company that used the same logistics contractor Colin worked for. Not the same department, not someone who knew him, but she knew how to make calls without it looking strange. She knew people who knew people. That's just who she is. 3 days later, she called me back. He hasn't been on active international assignment, she said carefully, for approximately 3.5 years. I had to ask her to repeat it. 3.5 years. I had been waiting for a man who had been home for 3.5 years. The thing nobody tells you about discovering something like that is how quiet it is. I don't know what I'd expected. Screaming, throwing things, some kind of collapse. Instead, I sat very still on my couch with a throw pillow in my lap and looked at the wall and thought about every phone call, every voice memo, every I miss you, I'll be home soon, and felt something in me go completely, utterly silent. He had been home for 3.5 years. Our marriage had kept going for 3.5 years past the point where he had already built something else somewhere else. My sister wanted to hire someone. I said no. I didn't want to pay someone to confirm what I already knew in my bones. What I needed was something I could stand in front of. Something real, something I could hold in my hand and look at. It started small. I checked the joint savings account we'd kept open since before he left. We'd agreed early on that his paychecks would go there, and I'd pull from it for shared expenses, insurance, the storage unit we still had with some of our furniture, occasional things. I hadn't looked at it carefully in a long time. I trusted him. I'd always trusted him. The account had $74,000 in it. That sounds like a lot, it is a lot, but 4 years of overseas contract work at the salary he described should have put somewhere between 3 and 4 times that in there. The rest had been going somewhere else, quietly, in amounts that were large enough to matter, but small enough that I hadn't been paying close attention. I sat with the bank statements for a long time. Then I hired an attorney. Her name was Diane, and she had the energy of someone who had heard every version of every story and was not surprised by any of them. She wore bifocals on a beaded chain and had a whiteboard in her office covered in what looked like a flow chart. First things first, she said. Do you know where he is? I gave her everything I had, the city where Vanessa had seen him, the information my sister had turned up, the account statements. It took her office 11 days. He was 40 minutes away. He had been 40 minutes away for 3.5 years. He had a lease on a townhouse in a suburb I'd driven through probably a dozen times on the way to other places. He had a daughter who was 2 years old. He had a woman. Her name came up in the documents, who had apparently believed for the duration of their relationship that he was a widower. A widower. He had told her I was dead. I had to read that part of Diane's email 3 times before it processed. I didn't go to the townhouse. I want to make that clear. I know some people in this situation do, and I understand why. But that wasn't me. I didn't want to show up on a stranger's doorstep and blow apart her life without warning. She thought she was with a man who had buried his wife. She was as deceived as I was, differently, but completely. What I did instead was file. Diane handled everything with a kind of brisk efficiency that I found genuinely comforting. There was a process. There were steps. Every step brought me slightly closer to the other side of this, and that was all I needed to know. Colin didn't see it coming, or maybe he did and thought I'd never actually do anything. I don't know what he thought. I stopped trying to guess what he thought sometime around day 3 of knowing the truth because I realized that trying to understand his logic was going to drive me somewhere I couldn't afford to go. He called me twice after the papers were served. I didn't answer either time. My attorney handled it. The only call I did take was from a number I didn't recognize, late on a Thursday evening. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. It was her. The woman from the townhouse. Her voice was steadier than I expected. She said she'd found my number through someone. She didn't say who. She said she wanted me to know that she hadn't known. She said she was sorry. She said she'd already asked him to leave. I believed her. We talked for about 12 minutes. Neither of us cried, which surprised me. At the end, she said, "I don't know what else to say," and I said, "There isn't anything else to say." And she said okay, and we hung up. I've thought about that call a lot since then. The divorce took 7 months. In the state of Tennessee, where we'd been married and where I still lived, abandonment is a recognized ground for divorce. Diane used it. She also used the financial records. She was thorough and calm, and I trusted her completely. And by the end of it, I walked away with my half of what should have been in that account from the beginning. Plus enough to cover 3 years of living expenses while I figured out what came next. He didn't contest much. I think he was hoping I'd be too hurt, or too tired, or too something to push back. He miscalculated. During those 7 months, I sold most of what was in the storage unit. I kept a few things. A quilt my grandmother made me, a cast-iron skillet, a lamp I've always loved. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with good light and a building that allowed dogs. And on the second Saturday after I moved in, I drove to the Humane Society and came home with a 3-year-old beagle mix named, according to his intake paperwork, Biscuit. I kept the name. I want to be honest about something because I think these stories often skip over it. There were days in those 7 months where I was not doing well. Days where I woke up at 4 in the morning and lay in the dark and went through every memory of our marriage looking for the moment I should have known, looking for the thing I missed, looking for the place where I was stupid or naive or too trusting. I would catalog conversations, phone calls, the times I'd defended him to my mother. When she'd ask careful questions she was too kind to ask outright. I would lie there and feel like an idiot, and then I would feel angry, and then I would feel something worse than both of those things, which was grief. Actual grief. For a person I thought I knew, for a version of my life I believed in completely. I'm not saying this to make anyone feel sorry for me. I'm saying it because I think this she was brave and she moved on and she was fine version of events is only part of the truth. The rest of it is less tidy. The rest of it is eating cereal for dinner at 9:30 at night and crying into it a little, and then feeling embarrassed about crying into your cereal, and then deciding to be embarrassed later, and just crying now. That happened. All of it. And then, slowly, it didn't happen as much. And then, more slowly still, it stopped. My sister threw me a birthday party last April. Nothing elaborate. 12 people, her backyard, string lights, and a cooler full of seltzers, and a sheet cake from Publix that said, "Happy Birthday, June" in green frosting. My mother came. My 2 closest friends from work came. Biscuit came and ate part of a paper plate and was fine. I stood in that backyard with a seltzer in my hand and looked at the people I loved and thought, this is mine. This is actually mine. Not the apartment, not the settlement money, not any of the practical things Diane had helped me secure. I meant the life. The one that was now, fully and completely, my own to build. I turned 34 that day. I remember thinking I had spent my late 20s and early 30s waiting for a life to begin. holding space for a future that was never going to arrive. Not in the shape I'd imagined it. And here I was on the other side of that, and the strange thing, the thing I hadn't expected, was that I felt lighter. Not happy. Exactly. Not yet. But lighter. Like I'd finally put down something very heavy and my arms were still trembling from it, but my hands were free. I still pass that Trader Joe's on Broadmoor sometimes. I don't avoid it. There's no reason to avoid it. It's a Trader Joe's. I buy their unexpected cheddar and their frozen orange chicken there, and I stand in line and I do not think about elevators or profile photos or purple-painted thumbnails, most of the time. Sometimes I think about Vanessa and what it must have taken her to say what she said. She didn't have to. It would have been so much easier to say nothing, to tell herself she was probably wrong, step off that elevator, go home and let me keep living in a version of reality that wasn't true. She chose not to do that. I never properly thanked her. I've thought about it. I've drafted the conversation in my head a dozen times. Someday I might actually say it out loud. Something like, "You gave me back my life without even knowing that's what you were doing. You said 7 words in an elevator and everything changed. And it was terrible for a while, and then it wasn't, and I'm okay. I'm really okay." Biscuit is asleep at my feet as I write this. He snores a little, which the vet says is normal for his breed. Outside my window, the maple tree is turning, which means fall is actually here even though it still felt like summer last week. I have a good job and a good apartment, and a dog who ate part of a paper plate and was completely fine. I don't know what Colin is doing now. I don't think about it much. I hope that woman and her daughter are somewhere safe and that he's not lying to anyone else. But I can't control that, and I've made peace with not being able to control it. What I can control is this: the window I'm sitting next to, the tea that's cooling beside my laptop, the life that is, finally only mine. That's enough. That's more than enough. I've thought a lot about what made Colin think he could keep going indefinitely. Not in an obsessive way. I'm past that. But in the way you sometimes turn a strange object over in your hands just to understand what it is. And what I keep coming back to is this: he could keep going because I made it easy. Not because I was foolish. Not because I was weak. But because I was consistent and trusting and I kept my word, and he counted on that. He built a second life on the foundation of my reliability. Every time I said I understand, take the extension. Every time I didn't push, every time I believed him, he read that as permission to keep going. My loyalty became the thing that enabled his deception. That's not self-blame. That's just the mechanics of how it worked. And understanding the mechanics matters, because once you see it clearly, you stop asking what was wrong with me, and start asking what do I actually want to build next. The thing about Vanessa is that she almost didn't say anything. She told me that later, that she'd been going back and forth the entire elevator ride. That she'd almost stepped off and let me go on with my evening. What made her speak was something simple. She decided that if it were her, she'd want to know. That's it. No grand moral calculation, just a woman deciding that the truth was worth the awkwardness. I think about that a lot. The people who change your life rarely know they're doing it. They're just making a small, ordinary choice to be honest when it would have been easier not to be. Vanessa gave me a gift she didn't even fully understand she was giving. And Diane, my attorney, she gave me something too. Not just the legal outcome, but the experience of watching someone be completely competent and unsurprised on my behalf. She'd seen worse. She handled it. That steadiness was something I held on to. What I know now, on the other side of all of it, is that the qualities that got me through, the stubbornness to keep going when I was eating cereal at 9:30 at night and crying into it, the willingness to look at the bank statements even when every part of me didn't want to, the decision to file even when it felt too big, those were mine. I didn't find them because of what happened. They were already there. The situation just made them visible. There's a version of this story where I stay quiet, where I don't call my sister, where I tell myself Vanessa was probably wrong and I go home and make dinner and wait 2 more months for a man who is never coming. I almost was that version. The distance between who I was and who I needed to be was about 7 words in an elevator and 1 phone call I almost didn't make. If you're sitting somewhere right now with a feeling you've been talking yourself out of, some quiet, low, heavy thing you've been carrying and pretending isn't there, I'm not going to tell you what to do with it. I don't know your situation. But I know that the truth, even when it's terrible, gives you something to actually stand on. The not knowing is what hollows you out slowly, year by year, while you wait for a life that isn't coming. I have a dog named Biscuit, and a window with good light, and a life that belongs entirely to me. It took losing the thing I thought I wanted to find out that I was capable of building something better. That's the whole story. That's all of it.